What's up? I am Machine Gun Kelly, and look, I know Halloween is going to suck this year because there's no trick-or-treating and all that, but I've got a treat. There's a musical podcast that I made with my friends 24K Golden, Ian Dior, and Dana Dentata, and Satan. Well, Satan's not my friend, but Tommy Lee is, and Tommy Lee is playing Satan. But don't just take it from me. Tell him, Satan.
Thanks, dude. It feels great to be playing Satan on this podcast. Listen to Halloween in Hell on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or whatever you get your podcasts on.
This is Fight Night, a new podcast from iHeartRadio.
They thought he had robbed the deadliest men in this country. Guys who would not hesitate to blow your head off.
This story from Atlanta, Georgia, has been reported for 50 years. But now, for the first time, you're going to hear what really happened from the people who lived it. Listen and follow Fight Night on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
For the week of Thursday, June 11th, as George Floyd is finally laid to rest in his hometown of Houston, Texas, America continues to grapple not only with the fallout from almost 2 weeks of protests, but also attempts to come to terms with the impacts of hundreds of years of racial injustices. Has this moment in American history given the country an opportunity for long-needed change? Are we taking advantage of it in effective ways? I'm Clay Aiken. This week, Politicon attempts to turn down the volume with a conversation that delves into the complexities present on just one side of the debate. Can the movement towards justice and equality be successful if there's not agreement about what justice and equality looks like? Tim Black is an author, activist, talk show host, and comic whose daily Coffee with Tim Black and nightly Tim Black at Night helped make him America's most watched independent media on the left. Comedian and talk show host John Fugelsang hosts one of SiriusXM's most successful daily shows, Tell Me Everything, and is the host of the podcast, The Sanity Cast. This week, if we can't even agree on what changes we need, how the heck are we going to get along? Tim and John, thank you for being with us. We've had the past few weeks of our How the Heck Are We Going to Get Along episodes being a great example of how the heck we're not going to get along. And so, we've had seminal turning point moment, hopefully a turning point moment in our country's history. And, I really feel personally that one of the biggest challenges that we have had over the past several years is turning the volume down. It seems like everything seems to be a 10 for everyone every time anything's in the news. We live at a 10. And so we sort of wanted to have a conversation this week where we didn't live at a 10 the entire time, because I think sometimes we get way too wrapped up in the indignation and the outrage of what's going on in the news, and we don't really talk about the policy. We talk about the politics. And so we're doing something different a little bit this week. We don't have four folks on. We just have the two of you and me. And I kind of want to talk about generally what has been happening the past 2 weeks in this country, especially as it relates to the protests that we've been seeing after the murder of George Floyd, and any progress or if we believe that there is progress being made. Tim, if there's an adjective to describe how you have felt in this past week, what would that be?
Wow. I would say, wow. I'm shocked. I'm shocked, and I'm inspired, but I'm frightened as well.
That's a lot. That's conflicting emotions, yeah? I mean, a lot to go through. Talk me through it.
Well, I'm shocked that people are paying attention now. That it's got it's got the attention of not only all American citizens everywhere you go, but it also the death of the murder, the killing, the slaying of George Floyd has gripped the world, it seems, and the entire world is paying attention. I've been covering this type of violence, state-sanctioned violence, for better part of a decade, and there have been other cases But this one, it seems as it's resonated in such a particular way, Clay. It's very different. So I'm shocked at the way that people are really paying attention, and the protest is unprecedented. And like I said, it's across across the country and across the world, frankly. And I'm also frightened this because I'm not exactly sure if the changes that we're trying to make, if they're actually going to be made, if this is just more rhetoric, if this is just more talk, if this is just to get rid of Donald Trump. It becomes so partisan. So those things. But I'm also inspired, once again, that people are not apathetic and that they did wake up and that they did pay attention. And now, once again, I'm frightened again because I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like, what we're going to do with it. So it's a lot in that, but this is an amazing time, and people need to take it. I'm so glad you guys have decided to kind of slow the volume down or turn the volume down or the temperature down a bit and do a deeper dive on this, because this is monumental.
What do you think has made people pay attention this time more? What makes this particular killing by a police officer of an unarmed man different than Freddie Gray, different than what we saw in Ferguson several years ago? Why do you think this one has galvanized so much more support for awareness?
I guess technically, if we really look at it, we could say the fact that he was killed so slowly, that he had already been subdued, that he was in police custody. And some of these incidents that we see, someone's fleeing. And if you give people any way out, any way to blame the deceased, they will. We're a country that reveres our police, law enforcement. Look at our shows, look at our TV, look at our movies, look at our Hollywood, how we depict policing. We, to a large extent, sometimes we have bad cops and we have shows about that, but we also balance that, like Training Day, for instance. We balance it with a good cop. So it's really hard to pass that threshold, but in this, people of all stripes saw a man killed slowly over 9 minutes. 8 minutes, I think, 46 seconds. And they couldn't wrap their head around it. There's no way. It's very difficult for people to justify it. In fact, I think almost unanimously, unless, the far people that are really out there, most people agree that this was an unlawful killing. This was murder. And the only discrepancy we have is it just him? Or is this a symptom of a larger problem? And how do we deal with that larger problem?
John, what about you? Your feelings? Give me an adjective for your how you felt the last week or so.
Well, I'm afraid I'm much the same way. My adjective would be multitudinous, because I feel so much at once. There's just so much to feel on so many levels every day. Every night on our SiriusXM show for 3 hours, we have really just been giving so much time over to our listeners and booking, fewer guests so we can hear more true feelings and true experiences from our real listeners. We are so divided, and the shouting is there. I don't always blame the people for that. I tend to blame the media and the politicians that whip people up into a frenzy, that set the tone for how we're supposed to treat each other. I think that's borne itself out. And on the one hand, I'm so inspired by the progress that we have already seen. When can you ever recall a series of protest marches in our lives that caused so much local change within the first 10 days? I mean, like Dallas changed policies, and now they have a rule requiring officers to stop other cops who are engaging in inappropriate use of force. In New Jersey, the Attorney General is going to update the use of force guidelines. Minneapolis has already banned chokeholds. They've upgraded the charges against Officer Chauvin, and his accomplices were both arrested and charged. LA City Council is trying to reduce LAPD's $2 billion operating budget. You've had 3 famous retired generals come out against Donald Trump. You've actually had NASCAR and the U.S. Marine Corps ban the Confederate flag. These events are all related. So it really is amazing and inspiring to see such a multiracial group of people. And by the way, from so many cultural backgrounds, so many age backgrounds. And let's be honest, there are some conservative brothers and sisters out there too doing this, which is really beautiful. At the same time, I'm also allowed to be terrified because we're still in the middle of a global pandemic. And all a flattened curve means is that there's room for you in the ICU now. So how much does it help essential workers? How much does it help the Black lives that we acknowledge matter if we are, with the best of intentions, inadvertently spreading plague. We have to watch the numbers, but how do we balance social justice with social distancing? And finally, this sort of thing, it's not that it's happening more, it's that there's more cameras. And not enough people are talking about Darnella Frazier, the 17-year-old teenage girl with her iPhone. And she is one of the reasons why we have this story. If there wasn't pictures, this would be another statistic that we never heard about. And it's just incredible how the entire world is responding to this. They're marching in France, they're marching in Amsterdam, there's rallies in Mexico and Australia, New Zealand and Brazil. So much good can come from this if we, the people, choose to go to a constructive, positive place with it.
But is it beyond just, I think you have a very important and good point, Tim, that the visual of watching a man be killed and watching him die for 9 minutes is certainly more powerful than some of the other videos, and there have been some really horrendous things that we've seen. Ahmaud Arbery, whose death we got to see on camera, was horrendous to watch as well. But this video of George Floyd, 9 minutes, and we watched the breath, we watched the life go out of him. Is that why these changes have been made? The NASCAR banning the Confederate flag seems as if, though, that's the type of move that they could have made or should have made years ago.
155 years ago?
Right. So is it just the power of that video of the officer kneeling on George Floyd's neck? Or is there something else going on in society right now that's causing people to be more willing or eager to make these big changes?
I think it was a perfect storm of the pandemic, as John alluded to earlier. The tension and the frustration and the sorrow, frankly, of those who've been affected by that, and people also being pent up in their houses watching news with nothing else to do. A lot of people still haven't gone back to work. They haven't assumed their normal routine. So this was it. And this has been it for the better part of a weekend. Like John, my show every night has been focused on these issues. Yeah. So I think it's not just, you're right, Clay, it's not just the film. It's also our attention being paid to it. And frankly, look, there's a vacuum in our news currently. Due to the pandemic. Once again, right back to the pandemic. There's no sports. There's nothing else. Once upon a time, you could turn and watch a game and turn off the TV, turn off the news highlights of death and do that. And everyone's on social media and everyone's streaming something and everyone's seeing it. So I think it was our reaction to it, to put a finer point on it, that we just could not turn away. And I'm proud of us. I'm proud of us for looking at it. It's not, you're supposed to be bothered. You're supposed to be affected negatively. You're supposed to not want to see it, but that means you're a human being. That means you have humanity. That's the hope right there, baby, that people are bothered and we still. Dr. Cornel West was recently on my show and he said, just imagine if people saw it and didn't have a feeling. That's when we're in trouble, baby.
Well, but is it not a little bit concerning? Because I don't disagree with you that it was in a way a perfect storm. We're all cooped up in our houses. We're there with nothing else to do, no work, etc. And we see this happen. But doesn't that concern you in some way, John? That when we do finally have the opportunity to get out of our houses and go back to work, that perhaps we won't be paying attention to this anymore? Is this moment going to last? What makes this one, either one of you, please, what makes this one different than the last? If it's just because we've been cooped up at home, then when our attention spans, our horrendously short attention spans in this country now are turned to something else, will we still be able to pay attention to? Will we still be paying attention to and as frustrated with this type of police brutality as we are right now?
Well, you all sure make a good point that it is an important factor that all these things were going on at once, and so many people were confined in the home and were more likely to be near cable news showing this murder on camera than would have been around to see the murder of Eric Garner, which was on cable news, or the murder of Philando Castile, which was on cable news. I think that so many people, and there was a lot of pent-up frustration physically of people who've been cooped up, a lot of young people, a lot of testosterone, a lot of people ready to get out. And this certainly, if you're looking for a cause to take to the streets, this is it. But like with all social progress, it only works if you work it. So, if people who are geared towards a more decent and intelligent society vote Democrat and then check out and don't show up for the midterms, we know what happens. Barack Obama, in the first year of his first term, sent an address to Netroots Nation where he encouraged them to stay on his case and hold his feet to the fire. It's not just enough to vote and then abdicate your civic responsibility and show up at the next presidential election. So if we keep the fire in ourselves, if we keep the hunger for justice in ourselves, not just that it's a novelty to go out and socialize after 3 months of quarantine, then yeah, but we can't discount the progress we've already seen. The hearings with the House Judiciary Committee that happened just today, as we're recording this, again, just because of these protests. And they're going to try and change the narrative any way they can, right? They're going to talk about Antifa. I'm going to declare it a terrorist organization. You can't even declare it an organization.
Why do you think
you can declare it an organization?
Well, no, I'm not saying why you can't.
You know why they're doing it. You know why they're doing it.
Well, I want you to tell me, though, because I may not. I'm confused. I don't understand in a situation where we obviously see that this
yes,
what's happened in Minneapolis.
They're going to talk about looting.
But what happened in Minneapolis was something that even Trump himself, for a moment, said was a brutal act that we should be ashamed of and should not have happened. Why are we turning the focus away from that?
Because
why?
I'll tell you why. Have you heard Donald Trump say the words police brutality? Have you heard him say the words racism or police brutality? In that Rose Garden speech, he talked about threats to the Second Amendment more than he talked about racism or police brutality combined. That's related to why we're hearing people already begin to demonize the character of Mr. Floyd. They're going to try to do any kind of misdirect they can. Now, let's be fair.
But what are they protecting, John?
I'll tell you, well, hang on. They're protecting Trump to one degree, because if we're talking about misdirection, the whole administration's been squirrel. And Donald Trump will toss out these yellow tennis balls, and our media chases him down and debates every one while he's gone on to do 5 more things. So if we're talking about looting or rioting or Antifa, we're not talking about the core truth, which is that George Floyd had a right to not be murdered by a policeman. That is the only story. And anyone who's trying to shift this to looting, trying to shift this, to other subjects, is probably the kind of person who's more offended by nonviolent protests against racism and police brutality than they are offended by actual racism and police brutality. Donald Trump has condemned Colin Kaepernick over 100 times. He has never condemned police brutality. In fact, he encouraged it on Long Island in 2017.
But the question really for me is, I can listen, I don't agree with the discussion. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the Second Amendment necessarily, but I understand that those people, those who are big Second Amendment supporters, when they feel that they are having their right to own guns threatened, like they might have that gun taken away from them, they get afraid of it. But that's what I'm trying to figure out.
No one's threatened that. No one's threatened that. Respectfully,
let me finish.
We're
trying to turn the volume down, John. I'm not disagreeing. I'm trying to get to the crux of what it is that they're afraid of losing. My point is that those folks who get upset and pissed off because people are talking about gun control, they're afraid of losing their Second Amendment right. They're afraid of losing their guns. Why would anyone be afraid of losing their ability to be racist? I guess that's where I'm trying to figure out what it is that people are afraid of losing, because as much as racism exists in this country, I don't believe anyone. Well, you know what? I can't say I don't believe anything, because nowadays, who knows? But it seems a little less comprehensible to me that anyone would want to defend their right to be racist. So what do we feel they are trying to defend? Is that what it is, or is there something else? Tim?
I would say it would be their frail idea of what America is and Americana. And these illusions that they create about what patriotism is and nationalism and what it feels to be American and law and order and damn it, they just canceled cops after 32 seasons and they don't know what to do and on top of that they couldn't go to the bar so
it's just change
that's
in general.
All a distraction. Yeah, it's just change in general, and also they don't want to admit the cognitive dissonance is kicking in overdrive, and they're trying to come up with excuses. As John pointed out, distractions to throw the ball. They pick a distraction. Look over there. Trump just tweeted 200 times in one day in order to try to distract us. He set a record for the number of tweets. Just to get away from the point. And the fact of the matter is, most Americans saw a problem. Right. And we're ready to take action. And the fact that these states are making these moves, I mean, these are just facts. Black folks are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by cops. And we're unarmed 1.5 times more often. So this is just reality. You know, even in states like D.C., the nation's capital, not even a state, it should be a state. Most of the crime, most of the police violence is in the state where we're 50%, 80% of the deaths are black folks. And when it comes to cops and fatalities, so this can't be ignored anymore. And I think what it is people are watching, Fox News and OANN and network, and they're being confused and lied to. And now we're waking up, and some of their neighbors who happen to take a break from that stuff has watched something different. Maybe they've been listening to John or Tim Black or Clay Aiken, and they're deciding that maybe there's something to all this stuff we've been talking about since the beginning of time about police. This is not a new phenomenon. And that's one of the things that picks me off, Clay, is that Democrats are pretending, or they're giving me the impression that they just woke up. Kamala Harris woke up last night and realized that we had police brutality. And where was this when Obama was in office? Where was this when we had the House and the Senate and Obama? And we had Tamir Rice, and we had Michael Brown, and we didn't get these changes. So that's the part of the reason why I have trepidation about going forward. But I do like the moves that the states are making. Is it highlighted because the president has been the foil almost to this situation, being someone? I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you, John. He certainly loves to distract, and perhaps that's his only goal. But do you think that we're seeing, because a lot of the stuff, I mean, if you look at the effective measures that were taken or have been taken due to coronavirus, the way these changes are made, there's been so little activity in the White House that the states had to make the rules and make the changes, and companies are forced to do it. And now we're starting to see certain companies make changes here because and cities making more changes themselves here because there's been a lack of leadership from the White House. I mean, in a strange way, the ineptitude from Trump has sort of caused others, and I can do that this week because I don't have to be unbiased, but the ineptitude of Trump has caused others to have to work and make these changes that perhaps they might not have done when they were looking for guidance from the top. I hate to I'm certainly not going to praise him for being inept, but in a way, has it helped that he's kept his hands off and not done anything at all, John?
It's hard to say if it would have been worse if he had taken a leadership role, Clay.
Yeah. Because I feel like that's an obvious one, though. I mean, if he had.
I mean, so often with these people, the dumb outweighs the sinister. You know, right. Their rap name is Dim Shady, the entire administration. But it's hard to say. I mean, it was not so much the lack of leadership, it was the anti-leadership. It was telling us one day to wear masks and then refusing to wear one and mocking a journalist as politically correct because he was wearing one just a few weeks later. To be the voice of the government response, but also the voice of the resistance to the government response at the same time. To actually use words like hoax. You know, it's not enough that he didn't do nothing. It's that he heard it. You know, in late January, when Alex Azar was trying to get the president on the phone to talk about this, the president only wanted to talk about vape pens. We know the dates he went golfing. We know how much he knew. We know that the latest he can claim to have known about this was January 3rd. And we know that he tried to keep a ship from docking to keep the case numbers down and said it would be down to 0 soon. We know that he said there'd be 1 million tests next week many times. It's that he's lied to the American people during a pandemic. So he doesn't deserve any blame for the virus itself. Goodness, no. He doesn't deserve credit for a China ban because that's rubbish. That didn't really happen. But he does deserve blame for not taking it seriously and for lying to his base. And with all respect to his base, these are people I love. They're my family members. We know that there are Trump supporters who get their information from him, and they do not fact check it. And he is treated with absolute reverence. And he has lied to these people. And now we're seeing, some states have done great. Andrew Cuomo, 2 years ago, he was getting beaten up by Miranda from Sex and the City. Now he's like a folk hero. Mike DeWine, a Republican in Ohio. We don't agree on many things, but my goodness, the leadership and competency he's shown. But then you have people like the governor of Alabama who's never believed it, and now try finding an ICU bed in Montgomery. So June is going to be a month of wait and see, and I pray that the people who listen to Donald Trump are right, and that the people who listen to doctors are wrong. It's the only moral outcome we can hope for, that it gets better and Trump can take a victory lap, because if the doctors are right, and looking at these 19 states where the caseloads are going up, I really fear it could be a terrible summer, and I just hope to goodness it's not. But I do think that Trump has been worse than doing nothing. He has deliberately made it worse.
I always thought that Trump would do a better job at going for the black vote. I really did. I thought Trump was going to make his play at the black vote, and this has kind of sunk that battleship. It looks like he's abandoned that at this point. That's why I was looking forward to hear what he said at the summit today, because I want to know, did he pivot back? What is he going to do now? I mean, he's still going after Colin Kaepernick, and instead of tweeting about Martin Gugino, the 75-year-old man that we also bust his head open because an officer got overzealous and handsy and abusive with him, he floats a kooky conspiracy theory that somehow he's working for Putin, or I don't know what he said, some crazy trying to track us, scramble. Yeah, Antifa, that's what it was. So, that to me is good for the Democratic Party, so to speak, but it's not good for America that he's doing that. It's causing more discord, and those people who are strong Trump supporters are going to dig in, and hopefully they eventually wake up. I don't know if I don't know if they're going to wake up or not. To be honest with you, I think they've given. I think this is a certain segment of society who hate media so much, which is mostly corporate media, that they're just going to side with Trump regardless of what he does. I mean, the guy told him to drink bleach. He said drink bleach, Clay. And listen, they let him go for that.
Liberals and Democrats gave Mitt Romney a great deal of grief in 2012 for his comments about the 47% who wouldn't change their mind and only the 6% who were persuadable. And it was inartfully said, but I don't know that Mitt Romney was completely wrong. There are on both sides groups that aren't planning on changing their mind or going to change their mind, and that sliver of undecided voters, and I just don't understand who those people are, whether you like Trump or Biden. I can't imagine anybody who can't decide between the two. But that sliver of undecided voters,
a lot of people, Clay, a lot of people
who can't decide between the two, though, right? And so
right, they can't, Clay.
And what do you think is caused
that's going on? We have those battles every day, Clay.
What do you think what do you think those people are deciding between?
Well, we got some of those people that are just so bitter, so upset about what happened with Bernie Sanders or their preferred candidate that they are turning all that animus onto Joe Biden. And he deserves a lot of it, don't get me wrong, but I think they've lost sort of like the thread of just exactly what Donald Trump's been doing to this country over the last 4 years. And an emboldened second term of Trump, is a dire prognosis. So that's one side of it. I mean, I live in Maryland. I'm not in a swing state, so I don't. It doesn't matter what I do. I'll vote for Clay Aiken or John. It doesn't matter because Trump has no chance of winning Maryland, at least not in my view. But these are the things that are going on. People have their distaste for the Democratic Party has forced them to not know exactly what to not dig deeper and make hard calls on Trump. And I fight it every day. I tell people, hey, I call out Joe Biden. I did that during the primaries, but now I got to also call out Trump. I'm not a Trump supporter. And I'm not going to sit here and badger Joe Biden to death while we let Trump skate by with no being held accountable with 0%. I can't do that. So that's a problem, Clay.
Let me come back to a phrase you used because I like it. You said some people have lost the thread and forgotten if they were Bernie Sanders supporters or Elizabeth Warren supporters or whoever, have forgotten that perhaps 4 more years of Trump is more dangerous than anything, and they've lost the thread. Do you think we've got a problem with that in society in general? Have we gotten to a place where we really have lost the thread? And I want to go back to the events of the past few weeks, the protests, some of the movement in general towards racial equality. Do you think we've lost the thread on many issues too much to where we're not quite sure exactly what we are fighting for, and what tangible changes need to be made, and instead we are doing things like canceling cops or canceling Gone with the Wind or firing people for tweets that they made 10 years ago? I mean, is this an issue that we've got to address also?
Yeah, I think it is. We do have to get back to what do we stand for. When Reverend Barber came on the show and we talked about the need for being focused on the movements, they got a Poor People's Movement now. We'll be trying to galvanize people together around these movements that matter. You know, we don't talk about poverty in this country, for instance. So instead of diverting your attention to how angry you are with Nancy Pelosi and that she wore kente cloth at this emancipation whatever that assembly hall, we should be focused on the fact that we have, 40% of, black children going to bed hungry every night. Like, we need to be focused on these bigger issues. And that is a problem. And you're right. I mean, I think it leads back to we opened up, we were talking about the distractions innate to our society in general. The way that, we can live stream 24/7 Netflix and Hulu and Pandora, and we're so distracted. We have too much stimulation is part of the problem. But I want to be clear, like, I see the problems, I see the issues. I'm not saying that Joe Biden is the solution. In fact, I tweeted out earlier that if trusting in Biden is like putting your money in a pocket that has a hole in it. I don't have confidence in Joe Biden, but I definitely don't have confidence in Trump.
Why did wax replicants crowd an Italian church?
And what do wax organs tell us about the history of medicine?
Why does the Minotaur still intrigue us?
And why would its bovine mouth crave human flesh?
Hi, I'm Robert Lamb.
And I'm Joe McCormick.
Join us on the Stuff to Blow Your Mind podcast for the entire month of October as we take our annual descent into a host of bloody, monstrous, and terrifying topics.
From forest spirits that beckon you off the path to wax sculptors on a rampage, we'll be looking at spooky subjects all this month to peel away the flesh and reveal the underlying science and history, and leave you with an even richer understanding of a world that's always weirder than we can imagine.
What sorts of scientific concepts can we glean from episodes of The Outer Limits or Tales from the Dark Side?
And what's the ghastly history and promising future of blood substitutes? Join us to find out.
New Halloween-themed episodes published twice a week, with older Vault episodes re-entering the world on Saturdays to spread around some of last year's grisly offerings.
Listen to the Stuff to Blow Your Mind podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
On September 17th, 2009, 24-year-old Mitrice Richardson disappeared without a trace in the woods near Malibu, California. She had been arrested at a beachside restaurant for failing to pay a tab and taken to the Lost Hills Sheriff's Station.
She's not from that area, and I would hate to wake up to a morning report, lost somewhere with her head chopped off.
The police released her just after midnight, with no car, no cell phone, no money.
She doesn't know the area. She's never been in your area. Well, I think she's depressed. That's what has me more.
That's worried you more than just her. Okay.
Mitrice disappeared into the darkness and was never seen alive again. I'm Catherine Townsend, host of the podcast Hell and Gone. We're going to try to find out what really happened to Mitrice Richardson. School of Humans and iHeartRadio present Hell and Gone Season 3. Listen to Hell and Gone on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah.
Should we have canceled, or should HBO have taken down Gone with the Wind, John?
Yes, but understanding that. I think Gone with the Wind is all factors considered, the worst movie ever made. That's just my opinion, because of the amount of talent and the amount of incredible acting and art direction and great filmmaking in that film. And yet it is such a morally abhorrent movie, where it's really about how rough it was for white slave owners when their right to own people was taken away. And boy, did they suffer after they couldn't own people anymore. The film doesn't take slavery seriously. And Hattie McDaniel wasn't even allowed to sit with her castmates when she won the Oscar. It's revolting as a movie morally. But our problem in this country is that we don't take slavery seriously. The fact that we're still having a debate over the flag of white supremacy in 2020 is concrete proof that we don't take our history of slavery any more seriously than we take our history of ethnic cleansing of the indigenous people here. So it doesn't, it's good that HBO took it down, but let's be honest, it shouldn't be banned. Everyone should see Gone with the Wind and see how weird it is, how this whole movie exists to make white people feel good in 1939 about their grandparents and what their grandparents fought for. But at the same time, it's a smart business decision, because HBO is not looking to offend anyone. And it is an offensive movie to a lot of people, including a lot of Caucasians who care. But I've been more impressed by how many African Americans HBO is hiring on the executive level than the fact that they'll make a big showy presentation of taking this off their streaming service. I want to know, what are they doing on a corporate level to prove that Black Lives Matter? And what has HBO done to discover, as the military has, that a very diverse hiring pool is very good for corporate culture?
I love that. And Neil Brennan, the co-writer along with Dave Chappelle for the Chappelle Show, recently did a bit, you may have saw, John, where he talked about, hey, all this performative reaction from white folks going, hey, we need to do something for black folks and Black Lives Matter. Hey, if you can hire black people, that's the best way that you fight back, is give them jobs. Give them positions in these, in these organizations, in these big companies, and give them the opportunity to grow and to fail and to do better and to try again. And, sort of like with the NFL with Roger Goodell, all of a sudden, Clay, saying, hey, I was wrong, maybe there's something to this police brutality stuff, but so, yeah, it's performative, man. Hey, look, I don't care much about Gone for the Wind being off or on. I feel the same way about Dukes of Hazzard. Why take that off? Who cares, man? Let's focus on the real issues. It's a distraction and an easy layup for the corporation to endear themselves to the moment of the people, the consciousness of the people at the moment, without doing anything tangible. Fund some schools, fund some disenfranchised children in the inner city. Let's give some business loans and those types of real fundamental things that impact people. We know people who are lower on the economic ladder are more likely to suffer from all types of issues, with the run-ins with the police to health problems. So let's do that. There's a way to handle that.
So that brings me to the discussion, or the call, the movement, whatever you want to call it, the past week or so, to defund the police. And I'm using that in quotes, because we've heard a lot of people say defund the police, and there's been a lot of controversy over it. Is it truly that people are calling for police departments to be defunded and abolished? Or what is it that phrase means to each of you? What does defund the police mean to you, Tim?
Oh, wow. Well, I'll just say, I just covered this last night, so maybe I'm a little... Look, defund the police is a horrible phrase, okay? I don't agree with the branding. We got to get better at branding our stuff. There's two sectors, bro. There are these activists that do want to get rid of the police and have no police at all, okay? That exists. Those are people. That's a small, minute area of people.
Why do they get so much attention then?
Because it's good. It gives people a free pass. Like it says, oh, wow, really? That's what you want to do? That's extreme. Okay, we don't have to pay attention to those guys anymore because they're crazy. So that's what the right is using to go ahead and just go ahead and to ignore the entire issue. Okay. So there's another group of people, a much larger group of people that understand that maybe mental health issues aren't something that the police should be handling, and maybe we should have mental health professionals going to do wellness checks on people who are off their dose. So when I say defund the police, I'm thinking more of reallocation, restructuring. How about new age policing? How about policing for the 21st century? How about we step out of the Stone Age with the way that we fund policing and the way that we handle issues in our communities?
Since you talked about it recently, do you know off the top of your head or at all if there are examples of police forces or law enforcement in any other country or other city that might be an ideal to work for towards in your mind? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I just am curious.
No. I know that they're revamping policing. I don't know if it's New Jersey. There
Camden,
are a couple
New Jersey
states that have already.
Right.
Camden, New Jersey. There's a couple cities that are making changes now.
Is it incumbent upon those people who are calling for defunding of the police? I mean, I think all three of us agree that phrase is, and that's why I put it in quotes, is controversial enough to make the conversation almost stop, unfortunately, when you hear it. So the phrase is not great, but is it incumbent upon those people who are calling for it to be able to define it better so that they can say, look at Camden, New Jersey, or look at Erdeborg, Sweden, or wherever it is that's doing something well, and these are the examples of what it is that we think we should do? Should they be coming with those details?
Yeah, I don't think they're really giving them the opportunity. I think Kamala Harris, though, she used a lot of words. She used a lot of words in that conversation with Meghan McCain on The View the other day. But she did a pretty good job of framing it. She's talked about imagining a new policing in a new way. Maybe we need to be more imaginative and creative. I think that's a good start. I just think they've been going to rallies. The footage I've seen, Clay, they haven't really talked about it. What they're showing on Fox News is not a real conversation with the people, asking questions. It's more of them saying, hey, look at this lady at this, look what they said to the mayor of Minneapolis, and look how horrible that is. And next, let's talk about how horrible that was, instead of talking to people who have a better understanding. Hey, they could have invited John or me on, and we would have articulated it in a way that's more acceptable and more digestible, and people will understand. When it came with facts about, that 1/4 of the shootings that we see or don't see actually by the cops are people who have mental health issues, and that's almost, in some places, it's half the shootings. Half of the fatal shootings are people with mental health issues, and cops are not trained, and cops don't want to do that job. Yes. And frankly, cops have too big a job. Everything from get my kitty out the tree to domestic violence to an active shooter is in the mall. Like, that's too much of a range for you not to know what your day is going to be like. And I think some police should be elite police who handle more at-risk, more high-traffic, more high-risk portions of the job, and some other policing shouldn't even require a gun, frankly. You shouldn't have to. You shouldn't need a gun.
Like the entire country of the United Kingdom.
There you go, brother.
Where they don't have guns.
It's an amazing thing, if I may, because it does speak to the outrage porn that you're referring to, Tim, that Bill O'Reilly would perfect every time there'd be a gay pride parade and people would be marching for equality. Bill O'Reilly would just show the leather float with all the naked men and say, look at this horrible thing. Let's show that footage again. Look at this horrible thing. They're an outrage machine because they're not going to engage in ideas. I agree with you both that it is a very problematic use of language, and in many ways, defund the police is really about defund the way we have been doing policing, because why should cops have to be social workers with guns? The language, I think, obviously plays into Donald Trump's hands because it allows Hannity to do what Hannity does, and we deflect the narrative. We're no longer talking about George Floyd's murder. We're talking about Mad Max, Fury Road, no cops, madness. But it also, and Trump will fundraise off it, Trump will lie that Biden wants to do it, but it also plays into Biden's hands as well, because Biden has already distanced himself from it. And we all know, with no disrespect to Democratic presidential nominees, the path to winning usually involves throwing leftist pet projects under the bus very publicly to appeal to moderates. Joe Biden's going to come out and say, that's not me, folks, I don't want to do that. It's going to make Joe Biden look like the sensible moderate. And then if he brings on Kamala Harris or Val Demings, he's going to have an African-American woman cop on the ticket with him to deflect all the charges that they're building up from this propaganda now of defund the police. And at the end of the day, it's just a negotiating tactic. It's the protesters bringing a knife to a knife fight. It's just playing hardball.
I don't want to to let us rely too much on blaming Fox, because I certainly don't prefer them myself. But I've watched.
I like Fox.
I've watched and read news from plenty of media outlets, and I guess what I'm saying is that I have not heard, with the exception of a little bit of what Tim said here, really any specifics on what that means. And so if we aren't able to provide, or if the side that is looking for reform is not able to provide some tangible examples of what reforming the police means outside of no more chokeholds and a duty to de-escalate. If we're not able to provide examples of, okay, here's where I want to take money out, we should be taking money out of these specific areas and putting them into these specific areas, and this is how that works. Doesn't that help Fox make their case? I mean, we can blame Fox all day for things that they've clearly done to bias this argument, but aren't they only able to do that because people on the left are not making it clear enough themselves?
No, you have to give people the microphone and allow them to have a conversation, and we're doing it right now, Clay. I mean,
well, we are, but I mean, I don't think CNN or MSNBC has necessarily given opportunities to people to give those specifics, have they?
That's why you got the John Fugel's Gang show and the Tim Black show. I mean, that's the purpose of us existing. That's why independent media exists, and unfortunately, we don't have the reach of cable news, but we are articulating this, and we just need to do a better job. And frankly, Clay, I don't want to put on the tinfoil hat, man, but I think there's a reason why it's been so, banana pillish, Dick Van Dyke walking and tripping over the ottoman type of whatever we got going on here about how do we describe police brutality. I mean, it's a horrible. Who came up with the phrase? I think no one's that bad unless on purpose. I mean, come on, guys. That's to run with it. So I don't think that it makes sense for them to use that term.
Well, that type of term comes from. I mean, here's my tinfoil hat moment. It comes from this culture of. This Twitter culture where we have to find something that's hashtag or 180 character worthy, and Twitter just does not allow us to have. I mean, by its rules, by its nature, it says do not have thoughtful conversation. Do not think about what you're about to say. Say something quick that's hashtag worthy, and defund the police fits on a protest poster or fits in a tweet and doesn't explain what people are asking for. Well,
how about F the police, but F as in fix the police? That works well. I like that.
See, why didn't someone call you to be the marketing campaign manager? Because that is actually sort of brilliant. I mean, but the culture of not thinking things through, the culture of just saying, and I also think that leads to, I mean, again, this is just my opinion, but it leads to some of these not finding the thread. What'd you say? Losing the thread, because we end up focusing on things like canceling Gone with the Wind instead of actually having the big discussions about the big issues. We focus on the small issues, like Jimmy Fallon did blackface on SNL in the year 2000 with Chris Rock standing next to him, and that becomes that's sort of where that's what scares me about this moment also, because it's all based on short attention spans. If we're so quick to go on to Twitter and move on to the next item, will we be able to fix? Will we be able to find ways to actually help the Black community to reform police departments when people's attention spans move on to something else? So what do you think is the biggest problem with the system, Tim? What do you think is, if we could fix one thing specifically, and I don't want to say racism because that's not something that's tangibly easy to fix. It's certainly the problem, but can you think of one or two very specific issues in the way policing is done, in the way police officers are, the oversight for police departments? However, one or two specific tangible things that you think need to be changed?
Well, New York is repealing the 50-A, which is basically, whenever you hear about policemen in a shooting, you always hear about the victim's history, but very seldom do you hear about the officer's history and what they've done over the course of their time as law enforcement. So the repealing of the 50-A is part of it, where we're going to be able to say, and this is good for those viewers of whatever network, to actually know the history of Derek Chauvin. as well as you know the history of George Floyd. That'd be one thing.
But what are they going to say? They're going to turn around and say that you shouldn't have that right, because are they not going to say this is just an opportunity to demonize police officers? Was the speech yesterday or today from the union in New York, the policemen's union, where they became I guess the leader was very indignant over any criticism whatsoever of police officers. Are they going to be able to be effective and against police unions who are trying to protect these police officers' records?
I think they will. I mean, I know that Andrew Cuomo is about to sign that. I hope he does sign it, and that'll maybe create a watershed moment where more states, more cities move towards doing that in their state. And I think that's part of what needs to happen, just more a transparency about our police departments. I just think most Americans have no idea what's going on in the police departments. That'll be one thing. And also training. Yeah. We talk about training, but I mean, as far as we need to set up those departments where certain officers do certain jobs. I don't think we just do away with police, but if we were able to get the unqualified characters out, and I know that they're banning chokeholds in California. There's a number of things, Clay, that
I love this idea about the different departments and the elite officers. Where did this come from? Because, I mean, it seems like there are very good cops out there. I think we all three would agree. There are very good cops, but they're not the ones showing up to these violent situations, unfortunately, or to these situations that weren't violent and turned violent because of the police. Are people advocating for this idea of separating the people in the department based on who can control their temper and who cannot?
Understanding the police training, not to monopolize, but understanding police training. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, John, if you know this, but one of the last things they do is they do that test about your emotional stability, and your that's like the last thing. Like that needs to be the first thing they do.
I mean, if you have a short temper, maybe we don't give you a gun. Maybe you're Barney Fife and you have one bullet in your pocket and have to ask for permission to put it in.
was safe. People, Mayberry was safe, wasn't it?
Because nobody gave Barney a bullet. That's exactly right.
But Barney still had a job.
Right. I have not heard this before, and I kind of like. I mean, I know we're joking about the Barney thing, but I like the idea of still allowing people to be police officers, but perhaps they're the ones. You know, if you haven't been someone who has proven yourself capable of maintaining your emotional stability, then you probably don't need to be called. John. Go
Why
ahead.
can't we have Yelp pages for cops?
Well, because most of the time, if you get because the dude who gave me a speeding ticket was probably a really nice guy, but I would talk shit about him like crazy anyway.
Fair enough. You're so right. But I do think, I don't know. I'm just so inspired by how many conservative white Americans have had awakenings in the last 2 weeks to say that like, oh wow, maybe it really is as bad as the African Americans have been telling us for all these years. You know, Mitt Romney's church, discriminated against black men in leadership positions until Jimmy Carter, and yet there was Mitt Romney as a senator saying Black Lives Matter. So I'm very encouraged by the fact that there are some Caucasians who've woken up to this. I'm encouraged by the fact that a lot of people know the phrase qualified immunity who didn't know it 2 weeks ago. And we're talking about this. We're talking about civilian review boards. I think it goes even bigger. I think this, like everything, goes into issues of privately funded elections versus publicly funded elections, because, we don't like to prevent problems. We like to fight symptoms. We don't want to prevent unwanted pregnancy. We fight each other over abortion. We don't want to prevent terrorism. We fight the results of injustice and poverty overseas. We don't want to prevent poverty. We fight crime. And any society that doesn't want to pay to educate poor kids is going to wind up paying to incarcerate the poor dropouts. So I like the thought that maybe the next generation is going to figure out how to get ahead of this and not just play catch up all the time, because we're talking about a world that's better for cops as well, where cops don't have to worry about mistrust because we have reform there, and there can be more natural trust between citizens and police. Now, that might sound utopian. I'm not an optimist. I'm a recovering cynic. But I've just been so encouraged by all the real change that we have seen in just a short couple of days. And I think we just found out I believe it was like just announced today that like in Minneapolis, the government's already pulled away from the police union until they can renegotiate. So it's like, don't underestimate how much good has already happened and how many good ripple effects will come from this if we stay engaged.
And we have to continue to protest. I think we have to be more strategic with the protest, but continue to protest. It's not time to stop. It's time to push forward because I firmly believe, guys, that America will allow us to get our asses kicked for another 100 years if we don't do something now. I don't think my great-grandkids need to be dealing with the same problem when they're in their 20s. Let's deal with it now. And I don't want to be the granddad that didn't do what he needed to do because he needed to get likes on Twitter, who didn't speak out because he was afraid that he wouldn't get his videos monetized. So we have to continue to fight and be able to push these issues forward. I mean, we're lucky. Actually, Clay, we're lucky it's not worse than it is. I mean, New York City had 180,000 calls of people with emotionally disturbed people, and only 78% of NYPD are even trained to deal with emotionally disturbed people. They don't. So just imagine the amount of turmoil that we could be experiencing, the amount of death we could be seeing. We're actually lucky that it's not more people who are hurt by police with the training that we give them.
Well, I appreciate the two of you talking about. I mean, I could do this conversation. It's nice. It's refreshing to not have major disagreement, but also still productive, challenges to our own side team to just try to make sure we're really pushing this subject and focusing on things that really we can do to fix it. So I could talk about this forever, but I want to move on to our quick fire round. We ask questions of our listeners. If you're listening, you can send questions in to Politicon or at Politicon on Instagram and Twitter. Sorry about that. I don't know my technology. At Politicon or on Instagram or Twitter, or podcasts at politicon.com. You can email questions, and we give our listener questions to our panelists every week to do a quick fire answer with. So we'll start with Tim. Tim, Aaron from Austin asks, did these protests give Trump cover to start holding rallies?
Wow. Oh man, that's a good question. I didn't even consider that. You know what? Doesn't matter. This had to happen, and whatever advantages he gets out of it or disadvantages, let it be what it's going to be. This needed to happen, and I wish it would have happened, sooner.
Tom from St. Louis asks, now that the White House new wall has become an art exhibit, is it now harder to tear down?
No, for the same reason that we have all these digital cameras and we can preserve this hypocrisy and this comedy and this satire forever. So it's actually a beautiful thing. I've raised a toddler. I was raising a toddler at the same time my country was electing one. And sometimes
I knew that I saw that one coming from a mile away, John.
Well, we have a lot in common. And sometimes during a tantrum, you have to put them in a secure playpen.
Good one.
Okay, Tim, Jared from Chicago asks, why are Republicans in Congress saying they no longer read Trump's tweets? We know they are.
Oh man, because there's no way to cover for him. I mean, what can you say? The guy, you got nothing. They got nothing to say. I mean, it's horrible, and you can't defend it. You can't explain it away. And they like to go out in public every once in a while and not be harassed by people calling them names like Turkey Neck. And Mitch McConnell earned his.
Who was that? Who could that be?
But they've got no comeback. They got nothing.
Okay, John, Stephen from New York City asks, Russia interfered in our elections. Are they interfering in our protests too?
Oh, well, I'm more concerned about the fact that they're still interfering in our elections. But yeah, of course they are. Russia funds a lot of chaos, you see. And anyone who was committing any acts of violence wasn't doing it because they were outraged by acts of violence. I'm sorry. I don't think those people were there because they wanted police reform. I think they were there because they wanted to be violent. And, Russia poured money into the Alaska secessionist movement. They poured money into the the California and the Texas secessionist movement. So, yeah, we know from every intelligence agency reports that Russia is seeking to maximize on chaos, and racial disjustice and racial tensions are areas where Russia has wisely known to exploit. Russia was behind the Blacks Against Hillary Facebook page. I mean, we already know they're going to capitalize off of this chaos any way they can, because if Donald Trump is no longer president, he holds a very little value for them.
Okay, I'm going to give both of you a stab at this last one. Mona from Norfolk asks, the polls showed Trump losing in the summer of 2016, too. Is this a repeat? Tim?
Ooh, that's a good question. It could be. I mean, I'm not one who puts too much stock in polls. I don't for a second believe that Trump couldn't make a comeback here. And anybody who was here for 2016 should know they should not get complacent if that's what they want to do is get rid of Donald Trump. Because he's got a very dedicated group. We need to focus. Democrats better be focused on getting disaffected voters out to the polls and ways to overcome, the disenfranchisement that's happening in these states where black voters, not and Latino voters as well, are having a hard time getting to the polls. They better be working on that overtime if they want to defeat Donald Trump.
John, is it a repeat?
I've been more afraid this year's going to be a repeat of 2004, but that's a very scary thing I don't need to get into. I don't think so. I do think that the greatest danger is that people become complacent, that people, don't feel happy 100% with either candidate, and that's terrible. I'm very sorry about that. But adulthood, like politics, is all about compromise. People will say, well, I'm not going to vote. It's the lesser of two evils. And I'm like, every choice in adulthood is the lesser of two evils. Picking your dessert is picking the lesser of two evils. Not voting is choosing the greater of two evils. If there is high turnout, then Trump is gone. If there's low turnout, he can easily win. But either way, I'm with Tim. The polls mean nothing.
Tim Black, John Fugelsang, thank you both so much. Tim Black at night and Coffee with Tim Black. We can find both of those where? Tell us how we can see him.
Go to timblacktv.com. That's it.
There you go. And your Twitter and Instagram and all that stuff, we'll make sure we share as well. But people should follow you on Twitter.
At Real Tim Black.
At Real Tim Black.
Real Tim Black.
There you go. And John, your show, Tell Me Everything, is still on Sirius and still one of the biggest shows on the network. So but you're not in the afternoon anymore, are you?
That's because we had you on it.
No,
that's because we had you on.
But did you change times?
We had you, Bernie, and Tyler Perry, and we blew up.
Are you still in the afternoon or are you in the evening now?
No, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So I'm also working evenings, broadcasting out of my New York City apartment so my audience can hear the ambulances all night long. And I'm doing it every night on SiriusXM, the Progress Channel, 127. They brought me in for the election year, and it wound up being the impeachment, plague, and protest march year. So it's a party every night. I also do a podcast called The Sanity Cast, which you can find on all the platforms. That's about how to stay sane at a time when the Christians have elected Caligula.
Well, I imagine there's medication involved with the sanity part. In order to,
we love having conservative. We've had Chris Christie's done my show. We love having conservative people on the show all the time. So I really applaud what you're trying to do here. I think hate makes us stupid, and no matter what your political ideology is, if you allow yourself to hate, you will say and do very stupid things. So I really, really applaud the tone you're trying to take with this, and I admire you both. Thank you for letting me be a part of this very inspiring conversation.
Well, thank you both.
I'm just glad I was able to keep up with you, John. You're a master of what you do, man, and you as well, Clay. Well, I appreciate you both
of you. I could not thank you enough because this has been one of my favorite conversations. Thank you so much to Tim Black and John Fugelsang for joining us this week, and thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe to the podcast and rate it with 5 stars because we think it's worth it. And write a wonderful review about how lovely you think our conversations are, and me too if you want. So subscribe, rate, and review, and then send your questions to us for next week's show. You can do that via Instagram or Twitter at Politicon, or you can email us at podcast@politicon.com, and we will see you here next week so we can figure out how the heck are we going to get along.
September 17th, 2009, 24-year-old Mitrice Richardson disappeared without a trace in the woods near Malibu, California, and was never seen alive again. I'm Catherine Townsend, host of the podcast Hell and Gone. We're going to try to find out what really happened to Mitrice Richardson. School of Humans and iHeartRadio present Hell and Gone Season 3. Listen to Hell and Gone on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
What's up? I am Machine Gun Kelly, and look, I know Halloween is going to suck this year because there's no trick-or-treating and all that, but I've got a treat. There's a musical podcast that I made with my friends 24K Golden, Ian Dior, and Dana Dentata, and Satan. Well, Satan's not my friend, but Tommy Lee is, and Tommy Lee is playing Satan. But don't just take it from me. Tell him, Satan.
Thanks, dude. It feels great to be playing Satan on this podcast. Listen to Halloween in Hell on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or whatever you get your podcasts on.